What's up, guys? We're back for our second episode this week. This time I've got a guest with me. We're going to talk about my record prediction, but I wanted to get somebody else in here because I don't want it to just be my insights and my notes. I wanted to get an expert in who really follows along with the Big Ten. Before we start, let me know in the chat that you can hear me. I had to change up our settings a little bit because this is a different stream with a guest. And as you know, I'm in a new studio space and wanted to make sure that he was dialed in as well. So with all that said, I'm going to bring my guest in so we can jump straight to it. You guys know him as College Football with Sam. Wrong button. Wait. Bang. College Football with Sam. He's got his own channel. I've had him on our channel multiple times. I've probably had him as a guest 6 or 7, and he has really good insights. So if you haven't heard of him before or seen him, you can click his name below in the title and it'll take you straight to his channel. Anyway, he talks all about the Big Ten. He talks about other teams outside as well, but he's a Big Ten expert is what we'll call him. Sam, what's up? I haven't seen you or talked to you in a few months, and finally we get to catch up 8 days before the season starts.
Yeah, honestly, it's a very exciting day for me. I always love coming on here and talking with you and bouncing ideas off of your head and interacting with the chat. So this is the happiest I've been for a college football segment in a bit.
Well, I'm glad. I feel like you and I have good chemistry usually on camera, and we usually have a lot to talk about. So I'm excited that you're here to be excited about Nebraska with us, because as much as you love Michigan, I know that you're secretly a Nebraska fan as well.
I do enjoy it when the Huskers win, for sure.
I don't know where that came from. I'm going to guess part of it had to do with the fact that when you were making content about Nebraska, you got a lot of fan engagement from us. And when Nebraska fans come over to your channel and get you all amped up, that's probably why you started to root for us, huh?
Yeah, I would say in part. And I think I certainly got my empathy or sympathy certainly got tripped by all the close losses. Like Nebraska was always an entertaining team to follow. And I always thought it was pretty cool that they were out in the middle of nowhere and yet were this storied program. That's kind of unique.
And how old are you, Sam? You're 20?
I am 22, turning 23 this fall.
So you were born in what, 2002?
Yep.
So we were talking about this on my stream the other night. I'm not sure if you had a chance to tap in, but we talked about how some of the younger generation doesn't know what it's like to see a Nebraska team win. And I'm just curious, before you started your channel, you were obviously a college football fan. What was your perception of Nebraska? Because you weren't alive for the good old days, right? So what did you think about the program? What would you compare it to in terms of a football program today, outside of obviously Nebraska?
That is so tough. Honestly, I viewed it as just another Big Ten West program, like nothing special.
Like a Minnesota kind of thing?
Yeah, Minnesota, like below a Wisconsin. To me, Wisconsin was
right.
This program that if they just got the right guy or if Paul Chryst took a step forward, they could explode, and no one else was really that.
Makes sense. All right, well, before we jump into what we're going to talk about, which is our record prediction, we'll get mine, we'll get yours, and then we'll go into a little bit about these teams. I really wanted you on because you're the Big Ten expert, so you're going to give me a little bit of a deeper dive on top of the notes I'm going to share. Before I do, I want to say what's up to the chat. These guys support me super hardcore, so Collector, thank you for being a member. Thank you for the $5 super chat. He says he's got work tonight. He's going to catch the video later, and he loves that we're collabing. 10-2 in a playoff berth is his prediction. I think we got a lot of people who are going to be dialed in with this playoff berth talk. Not that I'm hating it. I definitely want to ride high and expect the best. It's just, I don't want to get too amped up and then have all of us be let down. So I might not go with the playoff berth in this prediction. I don't even know what I'm going with yet. I'm going to let Sam talk me through it and I'll make predictions as we go. But yeah, that's a strong one. I just appreciate that we get to be excited about the possibility of that even happening. You know what I'm saying? Never mind, me's here, Xander's here, Wade, Max, what's up, Max? He says shout out to Sam, Justin, man. I love seeing all you guys back in the chat because I've been paying attention to the chat for 3 years now when I'm doing live streams, 4 years, and so I'm getting really familiar with all these names in here. Jose says, am I wearing the Nebraska shoes? I'm not. I tried them on last night. I actually went for a little run in them down my hallway. I didn't take them outside yet, but they're very comfortable. Definitely more of a workout shoe, but I love that. Mohana says, yo, Connor, my guy, happy to catch your stream, my boy. Well, thank you for being here, Mohana. I appreciate it. Todd, thank you for the $20 super chat. Sounds good, brother. Welcome back. I'm at 9-3 if our D can just be decent. Man, A decent D is not getting it done for 9-3, Todd. I think we got to have a good to solid D, unless you're expecting the offense to just explode and average 35 plus a game, which you very well may be. But Todd, I haven't talked to you in a minute. What's up? I've been a little busy, couldn't get back to you because it's been a crazy time. But I promise you, I will call you this week. Rod, thank you for the 20 Corn Craze gifted memberships. We appreciate the support. Rod's a solid one. Sam, I'm not sure if you know, he invited me to his tailgate. He's always been a huge supporter of the show, trying to make sure he does whatever he can to help us move things along. So he's very cool. And Daniel, thank you for the $10 super chat. Thanks for being a member. He says, hey, Sam, Michigan diehards on Facebook didn't like your post about Ohio State being the better program last year. I guess you're not quite indoctrinated enough for them. Give me some light on that. I don't know what that post was.
So I think there were Michigan fans. There was this one Michigan fan who said this really mean tweet about me that I thought was pretty funny.
You're a Michigan fan. Why are the Michigan fans bashing other Michigan fans?
I have no idea. I will say ever since the cheating scandal, and yes, Michigan did cheat, and then their toxic win over Ohio State, those fan bases have been horrible. Like, you have to walk on eggshells around a lot of them. I don't exactly know why, but you just do. It's a rule. But I made a post saying I'm sick and tired of acting like essentially Michigan at 8-5 was better than Ohio State at 14-2. It just made absolutely no sense. And then it went viral.
People just like to complain about shit, is basically what you're telling me.
Yes.
That's news to me. I haven't been on Nebraska Twitter where I see people just complain and yell at Iowa fans for no reason. It is insane how much time people got on their hands. Okay, Brad, thanks for being a member. Thank you for the $5 super chat. He says, Sam, I want to see you in Lincoln. Heart says 10-2. My head says 9-3. Okay, what's going to happen, Sam? Are you ever going to make your way out to Nebraska for a game? This seems like the perfect year to do it.
I will have to see. If I can find a way to accrue the funds, yes, that would be one of the destinations I'd love to go to. But
well, after this game, I'm gonna put you on game on how to make money on YouTube. So we'll talk about that after. But my YouTube money has paid for all my Nebraska trips, which is a good thing because I go to a lot of these games, you know. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But with all of the super chats out of the way and me acknowledging the chat, I think it's time that we jump into what last season kind of looked like for me, the preseason, and what my thoughts were, obviously how it finished, and then we get the ball rolling into 2025. Is that cool?
Yeah.
So right now, if you go on FanDuel, the over-under for Nebraska is 7.5, but it's a heavy favorite. I think it's like -164, which means Vegas predicts Nebraska is going to go 8-4 this year. Last year, the FanDuel odds predicted them to go 7-5. I put out a video prediction saying Nebraska would go 8-4, but then they ended up losing to Illinois, they lost to Indiana, and they lost to USC, which I all predicted as wins, and that ended up busting my prediction. I was decently close. I mean, I predicted 8-4, they went 6-6. They were pretty damn close in a couple one-score games. Do you remember what your prediction was for Nebraska in 2024?
I think it was 9-3. I think I originally wanted to go bigger, and then I'm like, I can't. And then I backed off and went 9-3.
I kind of remember you going high, which was a little bit alarming to me because I was like, why is Sam going so big on a team with a true freshman quarterback? But you had a lot of good reasons. I remember when you were talking about it. So I think I said the floor was 6-6. The ceiling was 10-2. That was my vision for last year. So I'm not going to give any predictions right now. We'll do it by the end so you know what my thoughts are. But we're going to talk about the floor and the ceiling, and we'll get yours as well. So with that out of the way, I want to start off with this Cincinnati game. And Cincinnati's a really interesting team. They had some really good moments last year. You know, they beat Arizona State despite not having, what's his name? The quarterback. I'm blanking right now.
They didn't have Sorsby.
No, they didn't have Sam Levitt. Sorry, ASU didn't.
Oh, Arizona State.
Sorsby was crushing all year. He's a dual threat. They've got 7 total starters back on offense. They've got 8 on defense, and they went and got Tawee Walker from Wisconsin, who was, I mean, decent there. He wasn't great, but he was their starter at some point. I think he had 14 carries against Nebraska, 60 yards last year against them. So he did significant damage, and obviously he's familiar with Big Ten style play. Then they've got Joe Royer. Is that his name? The tight end who came from Ohio State?
Yes.
Okay, Joe Royer is one of their best players. Yeah, so is he their best player?
Offensively, I would probably say yes. It's probably him or Sorsby at quarterback.
Okay, so let's say Joe Royer is their best player. He had like 500 yards receiving last year. I don't have that exact number. And then they ended up getting, I think, three starters back on the O line. They got a few transfer receivers in. And I know their defense wasn't like great, but they had an all Big 12. I get confused whether they're in the Big 12 or the AAC, right? But they had an all Big 12 nose tackle, and he'll be back for this season. I think he's like 300 plus pounds. So there's optimism for Cincy. They're coming in as a 6.5 point dog, which at first glance, me and some of my friends were like, Nebraska's not getting enough respect in this game. It's essentially a home game. It's a special game, which means Nebraska's going to come out extremely motivated since their fans are going to be there. And you thought it could potentially be a bigger spread given the fact that Cincy didn't make a bowl game last season. But when you go and watch what Cincy did and their style of play, they could actually be a problem and they could come out and win this game. There's no doubt in my mind that Nebraska could fumble it away and lose it if they don't come out firing, because Sorsby's a dual threat quarterback. Nebraska's dealt with those in the past and they've had their struggles. They've got Walker, who's a solid running back, and this team is known to run the ball heavy, but they also know how to distribute the ball out of the backfield. So that quarterback's going to find ways to make plays downfield once the running backs get out. Their defense isn't great, but we still don't know about Nebraska's offense fully, right? You have a lot of newness coming in, and we're expecting great things, but I'm not too sure any of us can say it's going to be a guarantee that Nebraska's able to put it all together. So what are your initial thoughts on this game, the matchup, and what to watch for?
I think that Nebraska's definitely the better team, but I think that Cincinnati has the arrow pointing in their direction for the matchup advantages. So on top of having Tawi Walker, they have another transfer from a Big Ten school in Evan Pryor, who came from Ohio State. And he was pretty good last year, had a high yards per carry average. Like you said, they returned some players on the offensive line, but that nose tackle you mentioned in Dante Corleone, I think he was banged up for portions of last year. They were not healthy on the defensive line and weren't really a healthy team overall. And that is what caused that downward spiral after I believe I think started 5-2 and then finished 5-7.
They started
They had a
5-2, and
hot
they beat a good team to get to 5-2. I think it was like Texas Tech or somebody decent.
Yeah. And then they spiraled out of control because they just couldn't handle the attrition.
Yeah.
So it's game one. They're healthy. They have some good players on defense, especially up front. And I wouldn't ignore some of their, I would say, all Big 12 caliber linebackers like Jake Golday or one of their DBs in Antoine Peak Jr. I think that they have the ability to, against a new and green Nebraska defensive line, the linebackers I know are very experienced, to get 3-4 yards, cloud of dust, slow the game down, and Sorsby and those receivers will be able to extend some plays and drives when they need to.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I think about the matchup.
I think a lot of people are hesitant to say that Cincinnati could win this game, but like you said, the advantage they have that you don't think about is they have this huge underdog tag on them. First off, no one thinks they can win. No one thinks they stand a chance. Nebraska's the hot team coming out of the offseason, talking about going to the playoff by multiple reporters. And then you've got Cincinnati with no depth issues. And like you said, last year, their biggest issue was the depth. They couldn't sustain the entire season, but when they were playing with their starters, they were a solid team at 5-2. So I think as long as they can stay healthy, which regression to the mean says they will, they're going to make a bowl game, which means you've got a team that could be 7, potentially 8 wins, especially playing in the Big 12. Anybody can win any game. I'm looking at their schedule right now. Their toughest matchups are at Utah, home against Iowa State, home against Baylor. Outside of that, they could be the favorite in every single game outside of Nebraska. So every Big 12 game, they could be a favorite, which is pretty interesting to think about when you think about how Cincinnati's been talked about through this offseason. So definitely a team to worry about in my eyes. But at the same time, you've got to shed some light on what's going on in Nebraska. They've got a quarterback coming in his second year who's obviously a better passer. I hope he's better at protecting the ball than Sorsby is. We've kind of seen what Sorsby is. He's with his OC and he's with a similar team that he was with last year, which means he understands the playbook and how much better can he get. Is he a 6th-year senior?
I don't think he's a 6th-year senior. I think he was a true freshman in 23. He's a redshirt junior. So
Redshirt
he's a
junior.
redshirt freshman in 2023.
Okay, so he's been in since
He's great.
2022. So he's a fourth year.
Yeah.
So I think he's a stud, but he's not going to have the same growth Dylan does. So if you talk about which quarterback can win you the game, it's more likely Dylan. And then
Of
when you look
course.
at Nebraska's defense, can they cause that chaos? Can they create turnovers? And I'm assuming they've got more playmakers than Cincy does. I don't know who Cincy's playmakers are on D in the back end outside of their nose tackle. And I think Nebraska's got an offensive line that's going to hold up better than they did last year. I don't know that we can say for sure Nebraska's going to be able to do what they did to Colorado last year, even though that's a game I would compare this to, at least talent wise. But I do think that at Nebraska minus 6.5, it would make sense that this goes to the fourth quarter, stays a tight game, and Nebraska squeezes it out by 7. I'm going to say Nebraska wins, and I'm going to say they do it between 7 and 10 points. What are you going with?
I would go with they win in between 3 to 7 points. I think
Okay.
that Nebraska's the better QB, and so I don't think it can be overstated how better Nebraska's receivers should be this year than last year. So they should be able to get down the field and score more touchdowns than Cincy does. But Cincy in this game may have a trench advantage or at least match, so they'll be able to keep it close. But with the quarterback and superior staff, I trust Rule more than Scott Satterfield as a coach, so I'd take Nebraska here.
Fair. Okay, I like it. So we're both at 1-0. Before we jump to the next game, Jim, thank you for the 1357. He says, Sam responded to my comment about him coming to the Nebraska-Michigan game saying, speak it into existence. Please come, Sam. Sam, we'd love to have you there. All of us would. I'm going to that one if you didn't know already. Saray, thank you for being a member. Thank you for the $2 super chat. She says 9-3 losses to Minnesota, USC, and Penn State GBR. Okay, so Saray's on the same page. She thinks Nebraska beat Cincinnati. The only concern I have about the Cincinnati game is that everybody's overlooking them. So as long as the team's not overlooking them, I think they should be in good shape. Moving on to game number 2. Nebraska plays Akron, and Akron's been a little bit down this past couple years. They open the season against Wyoming as plus, I think, 7.5-point dogs. So let's say they come to Nebraska 0-1. They finished last season with 2 wins. I think it was over like Kent State and Toledo. And they've got a 6th-year QB. This was the 6th-year QB I was thinking about when I was going through my notes earlier. So they've got Ben Finley. He's their best player by far. Threw for over 2,500 yards last season. They've got 3 transfers in on the O-line. They've got a running back or 2 who transferred. Their wide receiving core is kind of inexperienced. Most of those guys are transfers. And their defense only returns 2 starters. Akron is the definition of a team who's been hurt by the new NIL era, and they can't maintain a roster, obviously. So any decent players they have just leave once they get any significant clout, and other coaches know that they're good. So because they want to go and make money or they want to go and win, which totally makes sense. It's the dark side of the new era of college football. But when you're a team like Nebraska and you got to open up at home against somebody who's not like a Northern Iowa or a FCS school, it's nice that you can play in Akron and feel pretty confident that you're going to win it. So I don't know what this one's going to look like. You're going to have Nebraska coming off of hopefully a win against Cincinnati. And at what point can they sub in their backups to get more guys some experience? That's probably what this one looks like. So is it the second quarter? Is it the third quarter? How quickly can you start to sub them in? You want to keep guys as healthy as possible throughout the season. And they've got a big game coming up in week 4 and with no bye week. So it'll be interesting to watch that. I don't know what your thoughts are on that Akron game. I'm guessing you got the same as mine.
Yeah, it should be a lot like the UTEP game last year.
The UTEP game
one.
last year was fun because we got to watch Dylan in his first moments as a starter, in his first time as a college quarterback. This, I don't feel like will have that same vibe, but it will be a home game, so people will be getting to watch him for the first time in, 9 months in Memorial Stadium, so that part will be exciting. But outside of that, it'll be pretty chill, So we're both going Nebraska to win that one. The next game's Houston Christian. I don't even want to talk about this one. It's not interesting to me. It's an FCS. It's an FCS matchup. They play 2 FCS teams. They could be 1-1. They could be 2-0 or 0-2, and none of that matters. When they come to Nebraska, they're going to be severely outmatched. So good luck. You'll have to sit through that entire game because all of us are sickos and we want to watch what Nebraska can put on display, but it'll be a glorified spring game. And that brings us to game number 4. Game number 4 is serious for a couple reasons. Reason number one of those teams, whether it's Nebraska or Michigan, is going to be ranked in the top 25. If things go well and Nebraska is undefeated and Michigan beats Oklahoma, it's a guarantee that they'll both be in the top 25. But even if Michigan loses to Oklahoma, I think there's a really good shot that that's a top 25 matchup. So the stakes are high. That game right now, the line on FanDuel, is Nebraska plus 3.5. Think about that. You're getting 3.5 points at home. And I think it could shift in Nebraska's favor, in Michigan's favor, and the line could drop before that game starts. So I personally went and locked that in. I went and bet on Nebraska already because I'm afraid that might turn into a Nebraska +2 scenario, depending on how the OU game looks for Michigan and depending on how Bryce Underwood looks over there. But Sam, I want you to intro Michigan for us. You're the Michigan fan. You're the expert. Give us some insight into what's going on over there.
So Michigan is a team that loses their most top-end players to the draft. So that right out of the gate is not exactly a par for extreme optimism. I think that with a freshman quarterback losing the first-round defensive tackles they did to the NFL, there is a cap on this team. However, the quarterback play can't get worse than it was last year. Michigan only averaged, listen to this is pretty hilarious. They only averaged 8.8 yards per catch last year. That's dead last in the FBS. I mean,
to be fair, I didn't watch them throw the ball around that much.
Yeah, well, no one did. I mean, I watched all the games, and when they were throwing the ball around much, they only scored 7 against Illinois, and they turned it over a bunch against Washington. So, in short, the optimism from Michigan is that receiver and quarterback just can't get worse than it was last year. And on the defensive line, they have, I believe it's 6 seniors in their 2 deep on the D line. They have 10, 11 defensive tackles at 300 plus pounds, which size isn't everything, but a lot of those players have PFF grades in 60s, 70s. They've played a ton of reps, and they bring back much of the interior offensive line, and they got Alabama second string running back Justice Haynes from the portal, pairing him with Jordan Marshall, and Underwood being Michigan's most mobile quarterback since probably Denard Robinson, I would say, is pretty. It should be an impressive ground attack. Receivers very limited. So if you can stop Michigan from running the ball, you should stop them from moving the ball, period. Their biggest X factor, I would say, is kicker. Zavada hit several 50-yarders last year and is one of the best kickers in all of America. I have him as the best kicker in America. And
that's definitely an X factor when you're talking about close games in the Big Ten.
Yes, and that is something where I know I'm supposed to introduce Michigan here, but that's something where Michigan and Nebraska, if there's one edge that Michigan definitely has in this matchup, it's a kicker who was 21 of 22 of field goals and made all of them from 50 plus yards. Not all of them, but like around 5, I believe, were from 50 plus.
Okay, and then wait, really quick, go back to Justice Haynes. He's going to be the starting running back this year?
Yeah, he's going to be the starter. Marshall will be the backup. Haynes had about 500, 400 rushing yards last year.
Yeah, I'm looking right now. He had 79 attempts, 448 yards. He's a stud. I mean, I watched him. He was legit. And when Michigan got him, I was like, ugh, it's going to be a problem. But how does he compare to Khalil Mullins? Or Mullins?
I would say that Mullins last year was very underrated. It was clear from game 1 when I watched him that he was the best running back on the field. I would say that he is Michigan's most athletic running back that we've seen of the 2020s outside of maybe Corum before he got hurt. But we'll see if that translates because Corum was a really good, reliable running back. Haynes in the spring game, I will say, looked pretty phenomenal. I would be very shocked if he didn't have 1,000 rushing yards. I mean, Mullins with defenses always stacking the box because Michigan couldn't throw almost at 1,000 rushing yards.
Right.
So
no, I think that's an accurate pick.
Number.
Okay, and then what about their defense? Give me a matchup kind of advantage that they hold over Nebraska defensively?
Ooh, Well, I would say that Michigan's defensive line, while they do not have the starters that they did last year, they again have, I would say, so many playable defensive linemen like Trey Williams, graduate, Damon Payne, graduate. They all played significant snaps at
Yeah,
Clemson,
they
Alabama.
run deep over there.
Yes, like they could enter their third their third defensive tackle would start at a variety. It's like Texas last year, where Texas could rotate their entire defensive
Right.
line and be totally fine. So I think that their D line would have a matchup edge over Nebraska's O line, but
Okay.
that would be more so the defensive ends. I think that TJ Guy, Derek Moore, Cam Brandt, I think they'd have an edge over Nebraska tackles that, from what I'm hearing, are not having a very good fall camp. And it seems like Nebraska's interior is stronger than their tackles from the research that I've done.
Well, for sure, Nebraska's interior has guys who are returning, whereas the exterior, you have Gatula, but the interior guys are definitely the name. They're the ones that we all know, and they're the ones who we're not questioning. The tackles, you still have position battles at both sides, and you've had injury issues with some of those guys, right? So I still think
Yeah.
there's a higher ceiling for those tackles than you're giving them credit for,
Oh, certainly.
especially if like Pritchett shows up or Teddy Prohaska lives up, or Gatula comes out and he's on fire. You never know. But yeah, that could be interesting then. Okay, so defensive ends are really strong for Michigan. I think the one edge Nebraska is going to have in that game is they're going to be extremely motivated. They're going to have that kind of revenge feel, and they're going to feel like the underdog no matter what the vibe is. They could be the home favorite, and it won't matter. They remember what it felt like to get blown out at home. I went to that Michigan game a couple of years ago, and there was a guy sitting right next to me, like right behind me, a couple of rows. Dylan Raiola. He sat there. I was in the tunnel with him talking to him.
Oh, wow.
This is 2023, right? When Michigan blew him
Yes.
out. So he was there for that game and he watched it. It was an embarrassment. And I remember going back to the tunnel. He's got food in his hand. He's going back to watch Nebraska just get their ass kicked. And I thought, man, there is no way this guy's coming to Nebraska now. Because that was pre his commitment, obviously. And somehow by a miracle he came, and now he'll remember what that was like. Matt Rule remembers what that was like, and a lot of these younger players who were there, they remember getting stomped on, embarrassed, and sent home. I think to have a practice after that. Did that was that the time when they had a practice? I can't remember off the top of my head. They had a special practice after they got their ass kicked once. But yeah, I think Nebraska's going to show up for this one in a way that basically compare it to the Colorado game of last year. I think this Michigan game will have the energy and the feel of the Colorado game because you have this feeling inside like no one believes in us or no one did believe in us. And now this is finally our chance to show it, let it all out, and show that we're just as strong or just as talented as these guys in front of us. And I do think right now Nebraska is probably on the same tier, at least from the starting lineups, in terms of talent with Michigan. Like you mentioned, their depth goes much deeper, and they've had this pipeline of recruiting for a long time. So Nebraska's still trying to get there with their third-year head coach. But if you just go straight up, starters on starters, I do think Nebraska's team is as talented as Michigan's this year, despite the fact that they probably have a few more five stars on their roster. So I think this is going to be a really tough one. I think that you're going to have a defensive battle. I think Michigan's going to struggle to score. I think Nebraska's going to struggle to score at times. It could be a lower scoring game. I'm sure it'll be an underplay, but I do think Nebraska's going to come out and win it. I don't know. Obviously right now what their path to victory is going to be because we haven't seen what their offense looks like yet, and we're not going to know how they can exploit defenses until they play a couple of them. Mostly Cincinnati, since the other games we're probably not going to learn very much. But as it stands, I'm going to say Nebraska finds a way through the air to beat Michigan, and I'll take the better quarterback. I'll take the more experienced head coach because in that game, Michigan won't have their head coach. They're going to be rolling with I don't know who's coaching them that game.
It probably will be Chip Lindsey or Biff Poggi, I would assume, who are the offensive coordinator and associate head coach, respectively.
So I'm taking Nebraska as it stands right now. I'm sure you're taking Michigan.
I wanted to take Nebraska because I think they have the quarterback edge, and if anyone is going to score quickly to close out the game, it's Nebraska because their receivers against Michigan's DBs are something to be concerned about. But then I looked at special teams, and I think that having a X factor kicker like Zvada would help win a game like this. So yes, I'm
I,
siding with Michigan.
so I agree with you on that, but I think that we're not taking into account what Nebraska's special teams could be. John Hull's their kicker this year. John Hull had some moments last season, and now that he's had the entire offseason to prepare as the starter, he might be a better kicker than some are giving him credit for. And then you've got Eckler coming. I think there's a different mentality on the D. All of those are going to be things that could even the playing field, at least from that side. Really quick, before we move on to the next game, what's the ceiling for Michigan this year? I don't know what you put out for your Michigan prediction.
The ceiling for Michigan is doing what Oregon did last year, which means you win the Big Ten, you shock everyone, you go undefeated, and then you get destroyed in the playoffs by Penn State or Texas.
Got it.
That's
And
the ceiling.
I don't think it's out of the realm because we watched a really average Michigan team last year beat up on some pretty good ones. I mean, they beat up on Alabama at the end of the season, and that was a freaking shocker, right? That was a way more talented Alabama team. So interesting. It'll be fun to track it as we get closer. But for now, I'm gonna say it's a win. The next one, you've got Michigan State at home. I think they're going to be 3-1 at this point in the year. They're coming off of USC, I believe. Let me check their schedule. Yeah. So they've got Western Michigan. They've got Boston College at home, Youngstown State at home. And then they go on the road to USC before a bye week and a trip to Nebraska. My guess is they lose to USC, but they're coming to Nebraska off a bye, and this could be a really tricky spot. You've got USC, who's obviously a really good team, so it wouldn't be a surprise that Michigan State would lose, but they would still be frustrated and they'd be looking for any way to bounce back. If Nebraska did end up winning that Michigan game, you're coming off a high, and it's really hard to win back to back. Michigan State, for those who don't know, missed a bowl game last season, but they were in the first year with their head coach. They now return 9 starters on offense. They return 6 on defense. They've got their number 1 receiver back in Nick Marsh. The tight end's name is Jack Velling. He had over 400 yards. And then they've got a second-team MAC and a first-team All-Conference USA transfer. The O-line was injured last year, so they're obviously going to be better just based on that. And I'm thinking their offense is going to improve quite a bit. So this is probably a 7-win type of team. And because they're in year 2, I would expect them to have that similar trajectory that Matt Rule did. They're trying to recruit better. They're trying to figure out what their identity is. Jonathan Smith obviously is a strong coach, given his past at Oregon State. This is going to be a tough one. What are your thoughts on Michigan State?
I think that Michigan State is a team that is going to excel at punching above their weight class. I have them pegged as one of the best staffs in the Big Ten and in America. Maybe I'm biased because I've thought that way about Michigan State since Smith got there, but I think what he did at Oregon State speaks for itself. They play a lot of physical football. He made DJ Uyunglele look like a wonderful pumpkin pie
That's a good
instead of a
point.
pumpkin, which is
Good point.
impressive. Because yeah, we saw Florida State last year was awful. And I think that based on some of the comments he made last year, like after the Michigan game, he kind of said to the media that he didn't really fully understand it, but now he does. And based on how they didn't get a sack in 5 or 6 straight games, and Giles came out early as a turnover machine, I think they had a lot of learning moments. And I think with this staff, getting all those out of the way in year 1 is such a big deal. They should be much stronger on the O-line. They got an All-American from the FCS and Connor Moore at right tackle. Matt Golban, I think, was an honorable mention All-ACC center from Wake Forest. They got him. Marsh is as close to an alien as you can get in that wide receiver room. And like you said, they brought in wide receivers from the MAC and Conference USA that will
Yep.
really complement him. And Velling comes back at tight end. Defensively, they brought in Grady Kelly, D tackle from Florida State, who played well in 2023 and well last year. So I like what he's going to add to this group. And Joe Rossi, you should be familiar with him from his time at Minnesota as the defensive coordinator. They don't get a lot of pressure all the time, but they love to keep things in front of them. They love to be fundamentally sound. Michigan State last year was actually top 30 in a variety of statistical categories, I think including yards allowed per game. So that year 2 jump from that staff means that this should be a 7-5 team that really doesn't get blown out in any of the games they play in, except for maybe that Penn State game.
I think that's fair. And I really do think this could be a 9-win ceiling kind of year for them. I don't think they're getting to 9, but I definitely think this is a bowl team. And if you look back at Nebraska's history with them, I just pulled it up because, Michigan State and Nebraska weren't ever rivals, but there's been a rivalry feel. So you were a little young when Nebraska first jumped in the Big Ten, but it started out pretty cold for them. Michigan State beat them by 21. No, wait, Nebraska beat them by 21 the first year. The second year, Nebraska beat them. But then Michigan State beat them by 13. They beat them by 5. And it felt like Michigan State was establishing dominance. They were a playoff type of team. Connor Cook, if you remember him, Connor Cook was
Yes.
there. And he actually came to Nebraska in 2015, a game I was at, and somehow lost to Tommy Armstrong. So in a game where Nebraska was severely outmatched, you would think, because they were, I don't even remember what Nebraska's record was at that point. They were terrible. They still found a way to upset a team that was playoff bound. Nebraska ended up winning in 2018 at home by 3 points. Then Michigan State won the last two. It's always a back and forth. So, like I said, not a rivalry, but these teams always play each other extremely tough. Every game seems like it's close, and the last 3 of them, no, last 4 of them, 5 of them have been. So, this is a game where Nebraska, it's honestly going to feel like a trap. Nebraska's got to show up. They've got to be extremely focused because, once again, just like when they went to East Lansing the last time, they could give it away to a team who they shouldn't lose to, since they're not going to be as experienced, they're not going to be as top line talented, and there's a little bit of a coaching edge to Nebraska, in my opinion. So I don't want to say it, but I think this is where Nebraska slips up because I'm taking them to beat Michigan. I don't think you beat Michigan State after a Michigan win, even though it's at home. So I'm taking Michigan State here, unfortunately. What are you thinking?
Oh, that's wonderful analysis because if when I was thinking about picking Nebraska over Michigan, I had in the back of my mind they're not beating Michigan State off the bye. I think that, like I said earlier, Michigan State staff is one of the best in the Big Ten. I think, and Nebraska people don't hate me. I like Rule and where they're going. I think that Jonathan Smith's a better game manager than Rule. And I think as of right now, having the more proven defensive coordinator and an OC that isn't quite Holgerson level, but close enough, means better staff. And also keep in mind that Dylan Raiola had 2,819 passing yards last year and a QBR that I believe was, 63.8. Aiden Childs had 2,415 passing yards and a QBR that was 60.8. So Michigan State also should have that same jump in
Yeah,
quarterback play.
for
I mean,
sure.
Childs looked ridiculously talented at times, much like Raiola. And then other times, it's like, well, why the hell do you even have a scholarship to D1 football? But that's part of the ups and downs of
Right.
that. Yeah.
Okay, so what's your pick? You taking Michigan State or you taking Nebraska?
I'm going to take Nebraska because I already picked them to lose to Michigan. I think they split this series.
I do too. I think they split. They're gonna win one. They're gonna lose one, no matter what. That's how I'm feeling about it. If I'm right, that takes Nebraska to 4-1 at this point in the season, which obviously keeps them in the playoff mix. It keeps them in that 9 to 10 win range. They have all the potential in the world, but it would be frustrating for Nebraska fans to lose that one. I can tell you right now, and I'll tell you, people aren't going to be happy if they lose to a quote unquote superior team at home this year, a team that they're favored to beat. Moving on to Maryland, they're going to be 3-2 is my guess at that point. So Maryland's schedule before Nebraska is like Florida Atlantic, Towson, Northern Illinois. Then they've got to go to Wisconsin, and they've got Washington at home. I think Wisconsin will be improved just a little bit, and they'll be able to handle Maryland at home. They've actually got Maryland's former quarterback, Billy Edwards, as their starter now, right? Washington, I think, is a little bit of a beast, kind of an unknown too, but I think they're going to have a jump in the year because they're in their year 2 with their head coach. So say Maryland's 3-2. Not terrible, but not great. Nebraska's going to be the favorite. It's at home. The QB right now is an unknown. I think it's going to be Malik Washington, who's a true freshman and top 5 quarterback recruit, or it's going to be Justin Martin, who was the backup at UCLA last year. He played a little bit, though. He did well against Penn State, and he played a couple other games.
Yeah.
But overall, the offense is going to have to break in a lot of new guys. And I think their special teams is like bottom 30 in both categories. Their special teams isn't very good. Their defense only returns 4 starters. This isn't a Maryland team that you got to be too concerned about. I think they're going to be a little bit more inexperienced, and there's no way they match up with Nebraska in terms of talent. The one thing is, this is a road game for Nebraska, right? So that makes this a little bit more challenging. But if Nebraska was to lose one of those 2 games, Michigan or Michigan State, they're pretty locked in at this point in the season. And I don't think they're losing to a team who is this their easiest in terms of talent Big Ten opponent this year. It's either them or Northwestern. I would
Yeah, I was
argue
going to say
I'm
it's
more
never Northwestern.
concerned. I'm more concerned with Northwestern, and I'm more concerned with UCLA on the road than I am with Maryland. So this is the worst Big Ten team Nebraska plays this season. I'm taking Nebraska to win this one. I don't think they're going to lose it unless something happened. Like they got super hot. They beat Michigan. They beat Michigan State. They were riding too big of a high and they somehow dropped it, or some extreme injury news came in that we can't predict. I don't see a world where they're losing this.
Agreed. Maryland had, I think, the worst offensive line last year per Pro Football Focus, and all of their good defensive players got poached by anyone from Indiana to Texas. So Nebraska should cover almost any number here.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same exact thing. That'll take us to Minnesota. Minnesota's an interesting case. Let's go through Minnesota's schedule real quick before they get to Nebraska. Buffalo at home, Northwest State at home, Cal on the road, Rutgers at home. That takes Minnesota, in my opinion, to 4-0. They could potentially lose to Cal on the road or Rutgers at home, but I think they win both. They've got to go to Ohio State. Then they've got Purdue at home before they visit Nebraska. Is that a Friday night game? I believe it's a Friday night game.
I forget, but it feels like it's one, yes.
Yeah, I think it's a Friday night game. Okay. Friday night in Minnesota. Minnesota, a 5-1 team, let's say. Nebraska has to get the monkey off their back because Minnesota's been a problem in the past. Whether they're more talented or not doesn't matter. They've always had the coaching edge. PJ Fleck gets his team amped up to play, and they win in convincing fashion almost every single time. Whether they have their full roster at their disposal or not, I remember specifically it was a Scott Frost season, obviously. But Minnesota came to Lincoln with all of their backups because their entire team had the flu or something, and they still proceeded to run down Nebraska's throat and embarrass them at home. So it's just one of those history things, similar to Michigan State. They get up for this game. So if they're 5-1 at home on a Friday night on national TV with a chance to, Nebraska, in my opinion, would be a top 25 team at this point, with a chance to knock them off, they're going to take full advantage, or at least try to. They've got a new quarterback who's an unknown. Their star players are all in their running back room. They've got Darius Taylor. Is that his name? Darius Taylor. Taylor's the
Darius Taylor. And don't forget about A.J. Turner either. Came from Marshall.
Okay. He rushed for like 1,000 yards last year at Marshall. But
yeah, for
it's
7
not
yards
just
per carry.
it's not just those 2 guys. They've got Cameron Davis from Washington, who was the backup
Yep.
at Washington, and he's run for over 1,000 yards in his career. So that guy's a stud too. So they're completely stacked in the running back room, which means they're going to be a run-heavy team once again. And then they went to the portal and they got 2 receivers. They got Logan Loya, who was a starter at UCLA. They got Javon Tracy, who was first team All-MAC at Miami, Ohio. So their offense is going to be serviceable. And we didn't expect much out of them in 2023. I think it was Ethan Kaliak-Manis who came in, and it was kind of an unknown. Like, he could be decent, but we didn't know. And Minnesota ended up beating Nebraska that year with a bunch of portal receivers and unknowns on offense. So similar situation this season. Their defense has 6 starters back. They're led by Coy Parrish, and I think he's preseason second team All Big Ten stud safety. He had the game-winning interception against USC, if you guys watched that one. But yeah, Minnesota could be a problem. I initially, when I was talking about my prediction, thought I'm going to take Minnesota to beat Nebraska because they always do. And this one's going to be a night game in Minneapolis. The Cards will be against them. That was my thought. But on second thought, with the attention that they'll have to put into this game, because they know how tough Minnesota's been in the past, because PJ Fleck is really good scheme-wise, because Matt Rule does not want to lose in that stadium again like he did in his opener as the head coach at Nebraska, in the most disappointing way you could possibly lose, might I add. I think they're going to be locked in for this one. They're coming off a game against Maryland that won't be as tough. I think they're probably going to look ahead to this game anyway. This is one of the biggest games of the season in my book. So Minnesota will go down. Nebraska should win this game. I think they outmatch them talent-wise. And I don't know. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are in lockstep with yours. It feels like a trap game on the surface, but then you look at the schedule, and I I too have Minnesota going 5-1 entering this game. Nebraska will also be 5-1. So record wise, spread wise, it'll be tight. It's not like Nebraska will be unanimously picked to win here. Minnesota no longer has, so the reason they've beaten Nebraska, kicker, O-line. That's essentially been kind of
And
along with,
turnover issues.
yes. Yeah. Thank you. They no longer have a stud kicker. They lost Kesich, and the guy, I think it's Brady Denneberg, who they got in the portal to replace him, isn't nearly as good. And they lost Arase, their stud offensive tackle, to the NFL. And in the Big Ten bus tour, the analysts there mentioned how they were concerned about Minnesota's O-line. And from my research, I am too. Like, they're relying a lot on the portal to pan out, and also relying on a redshirt freshman quarterback to pan out. I mean, that's a lot of unknown. Their running back should be good, but if I were Nebraska looking at this game, my one weakness is the D-line, and they don't have the offensive line to consistently abuse my front.
That's fair.
So that is encouraging. And Parrish is a stud. He won't be burned in this game, but the guys around him and Minnesota's front, I don't know if they can hold up forever. So I think it's close. I think it's ugly, but I actually like Nebraska's special teams more, and obviously their offense more. So I would pick them to win here.
I like it. Yeah, the stress in my mind is strictly due to the past and because this is a Friday night special game, right? Outside of that, Nebraska should handle it, no problem. Like you said, with their offensive line. If they don't have a dominant offensive line, which they have in the past, at least in the Nebraska games we've watched, they're not going to be able to run the ball at will. And if they can't run the ball at will, Nebraska should be able to hang on and win this. So we're both on the same page there, which moves us into Northwestern, a team who I think will be 4-3 at this point in the season. They've got to go to Tulane. They got to go and play Oregon. They've got to play UCLA. They've got to play at Penn State. All of that before Nebraska. That's 3 losses in my book. 3 of those 4 games they're going to lose. The interesting thing about Northwestern is David Braun came in. I think he won 8 games in his first year as head coach. They won against They won against Utah in the bowl game too, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Very impressive.
Then last year, did they win 4 games? They went 4-8?
Yeah, they went 4-8 and barely beat Purdue, who was one of the worst teams of the 21st century.
Terrible. But their offense was a massive liability. They didn't have a quarterback. Now, Preston Stone transferred in from SMU. Preston Stone got beat out by, I don't even remember the name. What's
Kevin
the guy's
Jennings.
name? Kevin Jennings. But before that, Preston Stone threw for like 4,000 yards. So the guy's a real QB. He's not a joke like what SMU or like what Northwestern's had in the past. 2 of their offensive line guys are NFL prospects. Their running back room's stacked. They've got Cam Porter, and then there's one other back. I don't remember his name, but he was their number 2. Point is, Northwestern actually has talent this season. Their defense returns 8 starters. I think their D-line unit's one of the best in the Big Ten. They have a guy named Saka who's, I think, had 9 or 10 sacks in the past 2 years. I didn't take a note on that. I should have. But this could be the best team talent-wise for Braun in his first 3 seasons. So I'm guessing their ceiling is going to be 8 wins again like it was a couple years ago. And this is probably a bowl team, unlike the one they fielded last year. What are your first thoughts on them?
I love their defensive front. I'm glad that you mentioned Anto Saka, and then there's Aiden Hubbard on the other side at edge. Love them. Love Mac Uchleyan, who I have as one of the top linebackers, and they got Yanni Karloftis from Purdue.
Okay.
So their defense is talented. The O-line with Caleb Tiernan and then Jack Bailey, and they got some transfers. If that all pans out with Joseph Hyman and Cam Porter, they should be much better there compared to last year. I look at Northwestern as a team that should follow Iowa's model from last year. You can have a strong running offense, better QB play than your prior seasons, and you really lean on your defense still to win games.
Yep.
That's kind of what I see here. I mean, like you said, Stone isn't amazing, but he's far better than Jack Lausch, who I think now is switching to full-time baseball or playing another sport. Like, he's not even a factor in their QB room anymore. They will miss the wide receivers from last year, though. I know that AJ Henning and I think gosh, I'm forgetting his name, but they had some few really underrated receivers in year 1 and year 2 that they'll miss, but they should be better overall. I have them
Yeah.
winning 5 games. I could see them winning 6.
I think they're going to win 5 at least. I took the over on their win total. I think their win total was 4.5. I took that. So, yeah, I think Northwestern's a borderline bowl team. It's their 3rd year with their coach, better QB. They should be serviceable. Experienced running backs is a big deal, especially when you run the ball a lot. So, this is a home game for Nebraska. I don't think they're going to drop this one. They have a bye week right after this, so it lines up pretty good for the USC game after the bye week. I'm taking Nebraska to win.
I'd take Nebraska to win too. Might be a slow and ugly game, but they'll
Agreed.
pull it out and win.
It could be one of those games like Rutgers was last year, where it was slow. There was a lot of back and forth. You had turnovers. No one could get into the end zone. It could be that kind of vibe. But that takes us to USC. This is an interesting game because USC is, I think, a better team than what their record is going to show this season. So they've got Missouri State, Georgia Southern, and Purdue to start. Those are all guaranteed wins. Then they've got Michigan State at home, and they've got Illinois on the road. I think they probably split those. They probably lose one, win one. And then they've got Michigan and Notre Dame. Again, I think they split those. Lose one, win one. Then they've got the bye week. Then they come to Nebraska. If all that happens, USC's a 5-2 team. Probably not ranked in the top 25 unless they were to beat Notre Dame the week before on the road. But nonetheless, it's going to be a really big moment. USC last year was in an interesting situation because they started really hot with the win over LSU. They benched Miller Moss a little bit down the road because they had lost to Michigan. The offense couldn't really get going. I don't know if Miller ended up with an injury or what it was that sparked it, but he got benched. Maiyava came in around the same time Nebraska was going to the Coliseum to play them, and obviously Nebraska couldn't find a way to win at the very end. But they've got 9 starters back on their offense. They've got 7 on D. The wide receiver room is stacked. They've got Jacoby Lane and Mekhi Lemon, who combined for, I think, 1,400 yards last year, something like that. They're in year 2 with DeAnton Lynn as the DC. The D line's going to be better than it was last season. I think they went and got a couple SEC guys on the interior who are a lot bigger and more fit to play in the Big Ten, like Lincoln Riley knew they needed to get. I think the biggest issue for them is going to be their schedule, and that's what's going to limit their ceiling. After Nebraska, they've got to play Iowa, and they've got to play Oregon, and UCLA is a rivalry game. So USC is just in for a really tough test late in the season, or at least mid-season on. If you look at this game and why I like Nebraska, it's 2 things. Number 1, you have the talent edge, I think, on offense. So Nebraska's offense is better than their defense. Obviously, USC's had defensive issues in the past. It's getting better, but with all their talent coming back, I think they've got 7 starters, I said, they don't match up with Nebraska's talent at this point in the season, I don't think. It's obviously way too early to say it, but if Nebraska's completely healthy, they have more top line. When you look at USC's offense, they're going to be able to strike. There's no question about it. You have a lot of firepower, especially with a quarterback who's dual threat, who gave Nebraska issues last year. But when you take into account that it's a night game, it's a specialty game with the blackout, it's a revenge spot, your biggest playmaker and arguably one of the best players on the defense, like a top 3 in Sierra Wright, is going to be playing another revenge game against his former team where he's extremely juiced up. I think Nebraska is going to be able to get them and knock them off at home. So I'm taking Nebraska on that one, but USC is going to obviously be a very tough challenge down that back end.
I'm a firm believer that USC will enter this game with 1 loss or they'll be undefeated. I think that they are going to plaster their first 3 opponents.
Yep.
Michigan State could be tricky. But I am a known, quote, Illinois hater this year. I've been affectionately named that.
Are you?
Yeah, I think that going 5-2, 6-2 in close games with the talent they bring back is not a recipe for success. So
Okay.
I'm convinced that if they lose a game, it's to Michigan or more likely Notre Dame, since it's on the road. But I actually have USC entering this game undefeated.
Do you think USC? Hold on. I want to pause you right there. USC's playing Michigan State, who you and I both acknowledge is at least a 6-7 win team. They're playing on the road at Illinois, who you're a hater of, but Illinois is still going to be a challenge. They've got to play Michigan, who beat them last year when They shouldn't have. And then they've got to play Notre Dame at night in a rivalry matchup. You think they're undefeated with that stretch?
It's crazy, but they lost all of their close games. They have a good kicker. They return a good enough talent to build off a better defense and offense they had last year.
Okay.
And it was the worst offense that Lincoln Riley has ever had in his career by a wide stretch.
Okay.
He also, career-wise, including last season, wins 70% of his close games. So the fact that they fell that far out of control was shocking. Maybe I'm overcorrecting, but I think the fact that they get Michigan at home off a bye and they nearly beat Notre Dame despite not being able to stop whatever Notre Dame wanted to do on offense means that a lot of things should swing, I think, positively in their direction.
Fair enough.
However, I think they match up very poorly with Oregon. I think Oregon will beat them. I think Oregon will name the score against that team. It's a situation where Oregon's like USC, but better in every way. So there's just no hope that USC wins. And against Nebraska, now when you're traveling to Lincoln, that's when the miles really begin to build up. So you're going at Purdue, then at Illinois, then all the way out to Notre Dame. And then you go out to Nebraska. It's a back-to-back road game, night game. And I think that Raiola is going to be the best quarterback USC plays at that point compared to CJ Carr, Underwood, and Altmaier at that point in the year. So I would pick Nebraska to beat them. Very close.
Well, if you're taking USC to be undefeated going into that game, I think this is where they would stumble for sure. The gauntlet they're running, you can't sustain that unless you're a legitimate top 5 team in the nation. And I am not buying in that USC's a top 5 team in the nation. They're top 25.
Oh, no.
But being that good, you got to fight through a lot. So, okay, we're both on Nebraska here.
Yep.
Okay. So I've got Nebraska with 1 loss still. No, 2 losses. What was it? 1.
1 loss.
1 loss. Great. Now it gets tricky. You're coming off of an extremely emotional game. The fans just went all out. You got to wear your black uniforms. You got to, in my head, get a win at home. But now you're going on the road to the Rose Bowl, to UCLA, a team that a lot of people are overlooking. A lot of people didn't take seriously last year. Nebraska, known to have not taken them very seriously last year and ended up losing to them at home in a very embarrassing way. So UCLA, I think at this point will be 3-5. They're going to be off a bye. And I think this will be a must-win game for them if they want to go to a bowl. They're going to, I think they added, I know they added Nico Iamaleava, who led his team to a playoff. And then I think they added the OC from Indiana, correct?
Yes. Tino Sinceri.
Okay. So they've now got 2 guys on offense who were just in the playoff. These are not jokes of coaches, or these aren't jokes of player. This player and this coach is not a joke. These aren't guys that they just pulled off the street who, like some of these other teams, went and reached down to pull someone up. This was a forced lateral move for Nico. I mean, we call it lateral, but it's not lateral because it's UCLA. But he went from the SEC to the Big Ten. Technically, it's lateral. You had the Indiana OC, same thing. He just went from one average Big Ten team to another average Big Ten team. So we know who these guys are. We know what they're capable of, is my point in that statement. They have 6 starters back on defense. I think they added 8 full-time starters from the portal. So that means they do have experience, even though they're not fully loaded with guys who started there last year. I know that Foster had a short offseason to prep going into 2024. This time, he has an entire offseason, and he did a decent job last year given his circumstances. So with that, I think he's going to have a better outlook on 2025, at least what he thinks his team can achieve. So with that short season last year, he was still able to beat Nebraska in Lincoln. And if Nebraska's coming in hot and they have only lost 1 game on the entire year, they're emotional after a big win, I think this will be his chance to take him down for the 2nd time in a row, when a lot of people won't even be watching this game or taking it seriously, because UCLA in a lot of people's heads won't be a bowl team at this point. They're going to think UCLA's dropping to 3-6. They'll probably lose 1 more and finish with a 5-win campaign again. I think this is a huge spot where Nebraska could fumble it, and I think they will. I'm going to give Nebraska another loss here.
I like the logic behind that. I do. I think that it's gonna be hard to get through that 7 game stretch unscathed between the buys. Not impossible, not impossible because they get their toughest game against USC at
Yeah.
home, and Minnesota and UCLA are beatable. UCLA does have a good kicker in Mateen Begani, and Brody Richter is a good punter. And I think that with Nico being there, their offense should at least maintain what it was last season. I do have Nebraska eking it out, similarly to how Minnesota eked it out last year. I think that it would be one thing if they plastered UCLA last year, but
Right.
UCLA kind of plastered them last year.
They did.
Nebraska
They looked a
nearly came
lot.
back.
They looked a lot stronger. They looked better on both sides of the ball, and they wanted to be there when Nebraska didn't. Right.
Yeah, very much so.
So this is my third loss. That's what Don't Get Me Started said. What was my second loss? I went, let me go back to it. I said, I need to remember. I should have written this down.
Michigan State and UCLA. You only have given them 2.
Have I? Okay. I was like, who's my third? Okay. So we're at 2. Cool. Yeah, Saray confirmed it. Thank you. Okay. What are you thinking? UCLA wins or Nebraska wins? Sorry, I got
I'm thinking
sidetracked.
Nebraska. You're good. Nebraska ekes it out. I just
Okay.
think their roster's too good, and they have the bye after, so they can sell out knowing they
Okay.
can rest.
Cool. Moving on. We're going to Penn State. This is a tricky, tricky spot, Sam. At this point in the season, I think Penn State's 9-1 with a loss to either Michigan State, Ohio State, Oregon, or Iowa. You know, they go to Iowa before they go to Ohio State. So, although Iowa, yeah, they're Iowa, it's a back-to-back road spot, and that's going to be tricky for them. So, let's say they lose one of those, and then they beat Indiana, they beat Michigan State before Nebraska. I actually think that bodes well for Nebraska. Not sure about you. So they're stacked across the board. They returned both their running backs. I think the best running back room in the country. Is there any dispute to that? No?
Notre Dame would say they have a dispute, but I think Penn State edges them out.
Penn State edges them out. And then their offensive line unit, I think, is top 5 nationally. Oh,
Yeah,
and they got a bunch of receivers in the transfer portal. So they're stacked basically everywhere on offense, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Their defense, I think, only returned 7 or 8 starters. But it's Penn State recruits, and they have Jim Knowles, who led the #1 defense in the country at Ohio State last year. So defense should be just fine, just like the offense should. This is going to be the Penn State team that you would expect Nebraska has zero chance against. Even with only 2 losses on the schedule at this point, they'll likely be a 14-point dog. Would we agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Talent-wise, there's just a massive mismatch. Coaching-wise, I would argue there isn't a massive mismatch. I would say that Matt Rule, Dana Holgerson, John Butler can match up with James Franklin and Jim Knowles. Now, they haven't proven as much together, but historically, they've all had some big wins, and they've had some success. So I actually think, given the spot, this is a tricky one for Penn State. Let's run through it really quick. They play Oregon in September, but then you get into late October. You've got at Iowa. Then you've got November 1st at Ohio State. Then you've got Indiana at home. Indiana's no joke this year. They're a 9-win team in my eyes. Then you have a road test at Michigan State, another team you and I are relatively high on, right? And we think they could do some damage. Well, guess what? Penn State at Michigan State in mid-November is going to be a tough game for them. Maybe they win by 2 touchdowns, but it will be physical and it will be hard fought to earn that win. Then you have to come back home and play against Nebraska. In my eyes, a Nebraska team that just lost to UCLA. In my eyes, a Nebraska team who has an equal coaching matchup. I don't know if their quarterback, well, I think Nebraska at this point in the season is going to have a better quarterback. I think Dylan Raiola has a higher ceiling than Drew Waller. I think that obviously Penn State's going to have a better offensive line and better running game, but Nebraska's defense has shown in the past that they are very strong no matter who they are playing against, i.e. Ohio State 2024. I'm going to take Nebraska to beat Penn State after they lose to UCLA. I think it'll be a war kind of game, comes down to the final minutes, and it's a 3-point or 7-point victory, whatever. But I do think Nebraska could beat them. And I didn't take them to beat Ohio State last year. I kind of looked at that as a joke when we were looking at the preseason record prediction stuff. But This is a chance for Nebraska to really make a mark. This is a chance for Matt Rule to make a statement. He doesn't have a statement win in his career yet, and this could be the one at his alma mater. Come on, Sam, give me something.
Wow, I don't know if we've ever had a stronger disagreement over picking a game.
Yeah.
This is going to be fun. So I liken this game to Ohio State, Indiana last year. That's what I think of. Nebraska comes off a bye.
Okay.
Ohio State, they played a few games, had a tough stretch, had some injuries. Penn State probably will be the same thing with that stretch. I think Nebraska will score early because their staff is the best it's ever been under Rule. They'll score early. Beaver Stadium will get tight, and then it will be all Penn State from that point out. It's not me hating.
I don't think you're a hater.
I'm picking at this point Nebraska to earn what they'll be 9-2 after this. It's just the idea that Raiola could be better than Aller, but Aller could also be better because Aller was top 15 in QBR and has his second year in Kotelnicki's system and finally has wide receivers to throw to. Their O-line's awesome. The running backs are awesome. And Jim Knowles, with that defense and some of the D tackles they have, like Zane Durant's a preseason All-American, Alonzo Ford and Ty Blanding are over 300 pounds with PFF grades in the 70s with a few hundred snaps together. Tony Roaz is a linebacker who runs a 4.3 40-yard dash, and they got Amari Campbell in the portal from North Carolina.
Good point.
And A.J. Harris is projected to be a first-round corner. I have Penn State as the number one team in America, and I could be wrong on that.
I do too, by the way. I agree with you. I think they're the best team in the country.
Yeah. Odds say they will lose to one of Ohio State, Oregon. Like, odds say they'll lose a game.
Yeah.
They're minus juice. They're one of the only teams, if not the only team, to be minus juice over 10.5.
Yeah.
So Vegas thinks they're going to probably go 10-2, 11-1. But I have them going undefeated, barely, because I think that even with Franklin and all the questions he has, that the quarterback, offensive coordinator, and defensive coordinator, and then trench play that they have is just so far and above what probably the rest of the conference, sin Ohio State, if all their replacements pan out, has. So I think this will be a game where Nebraska's a good team. They'll come in, they'll be motivated, they'll score. But then after that, Penn State probably names the score.
So I think I can see that happening if Nebraska loses some of their top end guys to injury. Like, if you don't have some of their biggest weapons, I 100% agree with you. I don't think Nebraska has the depth to compete with Penn State. If Nebraska's healthy and they do have their key guys, I'm going to ride with my prediction. I think they could beat Penn State. I think Penn State, they're not the impenetrable force that Ohio State, Alabama, or Georgia have been in the past. They're a very good football team with very high expectations and a fantastic roster, but they have not been dominant in the way that some of those other ones have been that I just mentioned. So, yeah, if there was ever an opportunity for Nebraska to come out and make a statement, this is the week. So you're calling a loss. I'm calling a win. And that would take me to a 10-2 Nebraska going into their rivalry game. Is it at home? I think it's at home. Yeah. Home against Iowa. So let's talk about that. Iowa is an interesting one. I'm going to actually let you go into Iowa. I've been talking a lot. You go.
Oh, well, thank you. But Iowa's curious because on one hand, they lose so much with Caleb Johnson and their DBs, Jermari Harris, Sebastian Castro, and then Nick Jackson, Jaden Higgins, who each had like 100 tackles last year. It's a lot out the window. But their O-line returns Logan Jones, who's the best center in the Big Ten. They return Jennings Dunker, Leighton Jones, and Bo Steffens at other places on the O-line, guard and tackle. And Tim Lester's entering year 2. And Tim Lester helped revive that offense. And even with Cade McNamara and Brennan Sullivan and the billions of injuries they sustained there, they were able to score, I think, 27 points per game and had a really dominant rushing attack. They get all their receivers back. Gronowski is expected by everyone to be Iowa's best quarterback since Nate Stanley
That's what
or
I've heard.
CJ Beathard.
I've heard a lot of Iowa fans pretty high on him. He's dual threat, right?
Yes, dual threat. Won multiple national titles with South Dakota State. Now they had a good system, to be fair, but he should be much better than McNamara and certainly Deacon Hill and Petrus. And then on the D line, I actually like them to get better there. They bring back Aaron Graves, who's an all Big Ten player, and then Max Llewellyn and Ethan Herkett, I think, hit a handful of sacks each. Their biggest question mark is what Phil Parker's excelled at, which is defensive backfield play. So linebackers new, a lot of the corners are new. They bring back Xavier Nwapka, who has been a starter there for a bit, started all of last year, but he was not their best safety. And if they get DB right, I mean, look at their schedule. They have Indiana at home throughout the year. They have Penn State at home, Oregon at home. Off of a bye, they get Oregon at home in November. And their road trips are against Iowa State, Rutgers, Wisconsin, USC, Nebraska. Also got rival Minnesota and Michigan State at home. This is a team that if things go sideways, they could have a losing record because it is a tough schedule. But if everything goes their way, they could also finish ranked. They could be better than last year just by virtue of that offensive system taking that year 1 to year 2 jump with a far better quarterback.
Yep. I think their biggest challenge in regards to the schedule is they've got to go on the road to Iowa State. They've got Penn State at home, Oregon at home, but those are going to be games that they are not favored to win, right? You could lose those 3. Then you've got the road trip to USC, which you think USC is a legitimate Big Ten team this year, right? That could be a 4th. I mean, I see 5 losses potentially coming to Lincoln. And if they do have 5 losses, then I'm not looking at them as the threat that they've been in the past. Usually they're coming in with 8 or 9 wins, or 8, hoping for a 9th to get to a big time bowl game. And I just don't know that Iowa has that depth that they've had in the past. I think they're similar to a Wisconsin or a Minnesota where they thrived in the old formula of college football. And now with NIL and this new era, they are not able to compete at the same level. They are not able to build their roster the way some of these other teams are, like Nebraska's been able to. And while we've seen Nebraska trade off and go on the up and up, I think Iowa could be on the down. Now, I'm not saying Iowa's not going to win 7 or 8 games this year. They very well could. But I do think there's going to be a talent advantage here for Nebraska.
I'd agree with that. I would totally agree with that. The one thing I will provide caution on is the fact that they return good pieces in areas they haven't traditionally been strong at. So quarterback, defensive line has not been what they've been known for on defense. And they'll probably have their best receiver core in a minute. But the areas in which they are weak, that's where their coaches have excelled. Yeah. So running back, they've always had a pretty decent stable of backs. And then DB and linebacker, they have questions, but they usually reload there. So if everything goes right with the kicker they have in Drew Stevens, as I've heard you rant about Drew Stevens before plenty of times, because it's annoying when Iowa just beats you with field goals. I mean, Iowa kicking field goals cost Michigan a playoff appearance in 2016.
Ugly.
Yeah, exactly. I would say that Iowa could come in this game with 4 or 5 losses and Nebraska could have 9 wins. And just by virtue of Iowa's schedule and Nebraska's, it could be a very short line.
Yeah. Oh, no, no matter what. No matter what, short line, toss-up game most likely comes down to 3 or 7. I agree with that 100%. It's just who can squeeze it out at the very end. Does Iowa do it for a 3rd time in a row? I'd lean no. They're going to be in Lincoln. This is the most talent Rule's had. I think this is a revenge spot, double time. So I think Nebraska wins this, which I am shocked to say. I would pick Nebraska to be 10-2 this season if they won that. And what's your final? What you said a loss? Oh, okay. You said a loss to Michigan and a loss to USC, correct?
Lost to Michigan and lost to Penn State.
Penn State, that's what it was. That's what it was. Well, Sam, if we can get a 10-2 season in, my God, Nebraska fans will be feeling pretty freaking good about the next year. Let's talk about the floor and the ceiling, though. So, from a floor perspective, last year I said it was 6-6. I don't think their floor is 6 wins anymore. I think their floor is 7. I think you've got enough weak games on here that Nebraska's going to be able to squeak them out. And I think a worst case scenario is 7-5. I think a best case for me is 10-2. I think it'd be really tough to get to 11-1. We've seen Nebraska deal with injury issues, and they don't have the depth to get through an entire season in the Big Ten, playing really good teams at the end of the season, like a USC, Penn State, and Iowa. So I just feel like one of those games they're losing. I'm not sure which one it is, Penn State, Iowa, or USC. Call your shot. But to win all those would be really tough. So 10-2 is my ceiling. What's your floor and ceiling?
I would add one to the ceiling and subtract a win from the floor. I think that there's enough variability on defense and really just everywhere, I would say. So offense, I think, is guaranteed to improve, but defense, I think there's a likelihood that that will definitely regress given all the really studs they lost up front.
A lot of change.
Yeah, exactly. Tons of change going from seniors up front, Nash Hutmacher, Ty Robinson to greener players who should be good, but there's questions there. It's not a guarantee.
Agreed.
The ceiling I have at 11-1 because the schedule is such that where if Michigan is meh again, if USC is, if Minnesota's a 7-win team, 8-win team, but not 9 wins, and you and I are high on Michigan State, but we see 7, 8 wins and maybe 9 at most in kind of a bizarro universe. And what if Iowa regresses? Well, yes, it's a lot of trap games, but we've seen Rule win a bunch of close games before, and they lost a ton last year, Nebraska did. So regression to the mean, along with them finally fixing special teams, or at least getting on track to doing that, tells me they could enter the Penn State game undefeated. I wouldn't pick that to happen, but they could.
Yeah, there's a world.
At that point, I don't think they have much of a chance to beat Penn State. But if they get through their first 10 games undefeated, I'm certainly picking them to beat Iowa.
I really quick want to pause on not much of a chance. Last year, they went to Ohio State, and they had a chance to win the game with the ball in their hand at the very end. What makes Penn State such a daunting task in your eyes that Ohio State wasn't? Ohio State, by the way, won the national championship last year.
Because Ohio State's O-line at that point was terrible after Simmons got hurt. Like, horrible.
Fair.
And Nebraska's D-line, well, at times in some games, like the UCLA game, was a little bit inconsistent. It was a really good unit. The D-line was not the reason why that Nebraska lost any of their games. I think the D-line for Nebraska at least takes somewhat of a step back. And we saw Penn State lose one of their tackles. Not nearly as good as Simmons, no. But they lost Dunco against Minnesota. And it's just kind of like, okay, we'll bring in Nolan Rucci. And Rucci looked really good by year's end. And while Ohio State's O-line got better, they had an extremely friendly supporting cast of Jeremiah Smith, 2 running backs who some considered first-round talent, and a quarterback in Will Howard who was Ryan Day's most pocket-aware QB. Penn State doesn't quite have that this year. But they didn't have that last year, and they were still able to run pretty well on Notre Dame. They were able to really run well on anyone except for Ohio State, who had the nation's best defense in DC.
Yeah.
So I just think the matchup benefits Penn State more in the trenches than it did Ohio State last year. And Chip Kelly, too. Chip Kelly loves to run in light boxes. And when you don't have a good O-line, but you want to run in light. This is essentially what Ohio State did against Nebraska. So they did against Michigan.
Yeah.
Nebraska was able to relatively stack a light box, and their 3D linemen were able to eat up Ohio State's 5 O linemen.
It was beautiful to watch.
I don't think. Oh, what?
It was beautiful to watch too.
Yeah. Oh, it was that 4th and 1 after the I think botched punt where Ohio State got it in Nebraska territory. And Ohio State was like, yeah, we're just going to run it up the middle. Nope. Stopped.
Didn't work.
It was awesome. I mean, I watched that again against Michigan, and that was one of the funnest games I've ever witnessed, was my crappy quarterback, who should have never had a scholarship and actually was a walk-on, beat Ohio State with 62 yards passing. It
was insane.
So it's a matchup thing. That's really, really what it is. Now, I'm high on Penn State to a degree most aren't. So if I'm wrong about Penn State a little bit, and maybe their secondary shaky yet again in big games, their linebackers don't improve at tackling, then I could be wrong. But Penn State is better in the trenches offensively than Ohio State was last year. And Nebraska's D line, I just don't think is the same non negotiable. If they
Okay.
have a non negotiable on defense, it would be Sear Wright at corner. And while that's nice, and I think that could help in a big game like that, Penn State's entire identity is if we can run for 4 or 5 yards per carry on you, we're going to do that. And I think they can probably do that against anyone on their schedule except for maybe the Buckeyes.
Yeah, I get it. I agree with you. And I think the one thing that I would say Nebraska can hang their hat on this year is going to be their offense. And we can't make a prediction on their offense this early on. So until we see them prove something, it's hard to say they'll match up that well against the Penn State. So I like it. Sam, our record predictions are similar. Our excitement for the season is the exact same. I'm glad that we're both making content and now we get to enjoy the next, 3-4 months being on YouTube, talking to our supporters and people who enjoy the sport just as much as we do. And I'm going to have you back on the show pretty soon here. I don't know what week, but 100%. Maybe we'll wait until the Michigan game. That's coming up pretty quick here. It's literally 1 month away from now, huh?
It's I'm so excited for that game. Even more so than Michigan against Oklahoma.
Really?
Yeah, because I think that look, if I don't give Michigan a huge chance against OU. Like in the ideal world, Michigan should win,
Yeah.
but should isn't reality.
Should win.
If
They're an underdog for a reason, Sam.
Exactly. Like from my perspective, they
Okay.
should as in the expectation from a like fan is they should win. But objectively, they're an underdog, and Venables going up against a true freshman quarterback should be a disaster for the true freshman quarterback.
It should be.
So the Nebraska game is going to tell me what Michigan can do and how they can respond to adversity.
Cool. I like it. All right, Sam. Well, I've had you here for almost an hour and a half. I really appreciate you taking the time out, and I know my subscribers do as well. The whole chat's happy to have you here. So with all that, I'm gonna let you go, and I'm gonna talk to you in a little bit.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Thank
Go
you,
Big
Sam.
Red.
Yes, sir. We'll talk to you soon. Go Big Red. Chat. Sam's freaking awesome. He has a lot of insight, a lot of knowledge. Make sure if you aren't already subscribed to his channel, you click below. Just click his name in the title of this video and you can go watch some of his videos. He's obviously a little bit of a Nebraska homer with us, picking 10-2, but hey, there are a lot of people out there picking 10-2. Jim, thank you for the $9.03. I love that you just throw in the random change, help me out a little bit. He says 9-03 record. Okay, so I'm saying 9-3. Mine's 10-2. You and I are pretty damn close, Jim. I think 9-3 is probably more realistic than my 10-2. But man, when I went through that schedule just now with Sam, it just felt right. It felt like they could win those games. And if I'm predicting week by week how things are going to pan out, it feels like it makes sense. Brandon says I completely disagree. I think we have more depth now than we have had in 10 years. I agree with that. I think you're referring to when I said that Nebraska won't have the depth later into the season. No, I think Nebraska has the most depth they've had. I just don't think they have the most depth they possibly can have. I think Matt Rule is still building his team up and he's still getting them in position to be a consistent college football playoff contender. And he's going to need his few classes with star-studded talent. And right now he's only got 1 or 2 of those in. Give him 3 or 4 of those and then we can talk about depth that competes in a way that Penn State does or an Ohio State does late into the season. But I do agree. Matt Rule's crushing it. The depth is awesome. Nebraska's got a lot of guys who can play, and that can't be said in the past few years. So thank God. Let's see. I'm just reading through the chat, guys, if there's anything I got to respond to. We've been on here for a long time. I'm really glad you guys were patient and watched a long video today. It was almost an hour and a half. Crazy. Okay. I like it. I'd say 8-4 is more realistic. Kyle, we're not about being realistic here, brother. We're here to get excited. No, I'm just kidding. 8-4 is really, really, really realistic. I think 9-3 is just as realistic as 8-4. 10-2 feels a little bit like a pipe dream just because we haven't seen it in so damn long. But I promise you, there are 10 winnable games on that schedule. Red Wine says if we beat a USC, Michigan, or Penn State, then we will lose one that we aren't supposed to. So 9 wins. I agree. That's why I said I think Nebraska loses to UCLA. I also said they lose to Michigan State. So you never know. They could win all their big ones and lose some of those crappy ones. Either way, the final record's all that matters because that's what gets them into the right bowl game or the right positioning to go a little bit further into the season and play in December. But yeah, I'm excited. Jose says, don't leave us, Connor. We missed you. I missed you too, Jose, but don't worry. I'm back now. We're in the game. I'm making content a little bit more consistently, and we'll be here doing lives. I'm trying to think of what day my next one will be. I think I'll do some hot takes. Maybe Friday, a little hot take video. Preseason hot takes or predictions or bold predictions, whatever I called it in the past. I'll figure that out. But I'll get on to some research for that. Evan says, if you and Sam did a weekly show, you should call it Head and Heart, since he's super analytical and logical and you're more passionate and fiery. Ooh, Evan coming with the good titles. Thanks, Evan. If I end up doing that, I'll put your name as a producer. But okay, guys, I'm getting out of here. I got to go to the gym. I've had a long day working and then working on this video. I am so glad that you all made it and that you guys are ready for the season just like I am. So with all that said, thank you for being here. What was my outro? I can't even remember it again. I did this last time. Thanks for being here. I'll see you in the next one. Go Big Red. Wow.